every calling has a religious dimension, whether married or single, whether employer, manager, farmer, salesperson, or assembly line worker. But there's always been a special recognition given to the call to priesthood and religious life. But that is not the case today. The call to priesthood and religious life today is not popular. In fact, in the last 15 years, many priests and religious men and women have left this calling for a variety of reasons. Some have felt that they can serve God better in other callings. Whatever the reasons, good or bad, the effect on the church has been disturbing. Fewer answer the call, but there are still those who do. Today our guests are a young man and young woman about to enter priesthood and religious life. What religious encounter led them to make this choice? And without the benefit of the social status or position that priesthood and religious life once had, what sustains a young man or woman in this choice? And what are the dreams and ambitions of one who answers this call today? And there's the added dimension of living at a time when the church is undergoing a painful transition. Becoming a priest or a nun today is not easy, but it's certainly a challenge, and maybe even exciting. Our guest today, as I said, Patti Cielinski, a young woman who's going to be entering the Benedictine order, and John Horan, who is a deacon, who will be ordained a priest for the Diocese of Chicago this May the 13th. Is that right?
That's right.
All right. Now, here we are living in an age where, as I said, priesthood and religious life is not popular. So the obvious question is, what are you doing making a choice like this when so many say, why do that? Why waste your life this way?
My first response is I don't feel like I'm wasting my life.
Mm-hmm.
I'm finally doing with my life what gives me the most meaning and the most happiness.
What in your background first led you on the track to think about becoming a religious?
When I wasn't happy working, when I wasn't happy in my profession, I decided to look at what else there was that I wanted to do with my life. And I had a personal friend asking me, what was your other selection? And I said that I was interested in religious life. And so we went and continued for about 6 months talking about that other dream. And then when I had no choice but to leave my profession, leave my career, and then investigate religious life, I did it. I went with it, and I haven't been happier.
But before you finished school and was working for a while, did you ever have this an inclination this way before?
Back when I was 14, I did.
Like all young girls?
Like all young girls, I idolized my high school teachers and said I wanted to be just like them. And then when I was 16, I rearranged my life and decided to go into teaching, eventually went into a business degree, and was very happy, as I said, working in business. But I did have that thought back at the age of 14.
Business wasn't enough.
Nothing that I was doing before I left was enough. And religious life has answered.
John, what about you?
I think I began in fear.
And trepidation.
Fear and trepidation. It never quite leaves. But when I was in grammar school, I went to a Catholic grammar school on the South Side, and I was approaching graduation, and the local high school was Mendel High School, and it was an enormous high school with hundreds and hundreds of guys going, and I was in a rather small Catholic grammar school, and the thought of me being thrust upon these hordes at Mendel High School was too much, so I went to a minor seminary. So it really, for me, it really began in fear of going to a bigger high school. There was a vocation talk about going to this Franciscan seminary, and there was only like 50 guys in the place, so that appealed to me, not so much for great religious reasons, but
it was small.
It was small, and I would be able to know people. But it grew from there. You know, I met, I think probably the thing that has kept me thinking about priesthood all my life is that I've met, I think, extraordinary priests. People that as I was growing up, I wanted to be like, that were able to handle moments of tragedy and, you know, speak words of hope, and were funny guys, people that everybody respected, and when they talked, I got excited. They seemed to say stuff about life that I really agreed with, and that kind of snowballed to the point where I said, maybe I could do that. I'd give it a shot. So.
I remember, too, looking at my friends who were who are still in religious life, and always feeling that I was on the outside looking in. They were doing something that I wanted to do, and at some point I'd gotten too old to do it. But it was also having friends around me, what I considered my plausibility structure, these very influential people who I did respect greatly. They were having a good time working for the Lord, and I decided to give it a shot.
What do your parents think about this?
They're being patient with me.
Not enthusiastic, huh?
Not enthusiastic, because I did leave a good job, and there's a lot of questions about my future.
What are they afraid of, really?
I think they're afraid of my security. Will the convent be able to support me the rest of my life? And my answer to that is that there was no guarantee that the company I worked for or a husband, someone that I would become committed to, could do the same. So I was always going to be striking out on my own. So it's just that fear of what will happen to her 10 years from now.
You tell the Benedict has been around for approximately
1,500.
1,400 years. My God, that's longer than General Motors.
Exactly. Exactly.
How about your parents, Jan?
All my father's ever said about my vocation is, don't be a bricklayer. He's a bricklayer. He's an Irish Catholic bricklayer. And my mother currently is very angry with me because I haven't sent out the invitations for my first Mass. But they're very excited about it. And they've been real good about it. They've never pressured me one way or the other, and many times have said, especially when it got rocky, you know, because it's, you know yourself, that vocation, coming to that, any major life decision is not an easy thing. And the rough times, they've always said, whatever you want to do, as long as you're happy, we'll support you. And I could have, you know, I could come in and say I'd be a rag picker, you know, and I think they'd support me in that. But they're very excited about priesthood.
And I'm supported. I want to say that much, that my parents, my family, I have a twin sister who is delighted that I've made this choice.
Oh, twin.
Yes, not identical, and so there won't be any confusion who is the sister and who is the mother.
But she's not thinking the same way you are.
Not after 2 children, no.
She's married.
Heavily married, yes.
Well, now, here you are coming into the church at a time when you're aware of the fact that, you know, what you're doing is not as popular. You know, in my day, which is a while ago now, you know, that was a prestigious thing to do. There was great social support. There really was. Although I must admit my own parents never once encouraged it. Never discouraged it. It was always, this is what you want? Fine.
Kind of neutral.
Yeah, well, they're very neutral towards it. They never said one way. That was always left up to myself. But there were great supports. You knew that the priest or the religious in the community was a person. Today, that's not quite the same situation. What do you think about that? Or does it bother you at all? Or maybe you don't even think about it?
No, I don't. I mean, I certainly realize that there are fewer and fewer entering religious life, but I'm not following the pack. And once I made the decision a couple of years ago to do with my life what I had to do to be happy, I just investigated the road, the communities, for example, that I might be interested in, And I didn't check around me and say, well, is this where everyone else is going? It just happens to be a coincidence that two young women will be entering with me this fall. But I didn't go to that Benedictine priory because I knew that they had the best thing going this year.
Are you disturbed by the situation? Or
Marty, I kind of approach it with glee, because I think what we're about now is, before, I mean, everybody knew what priests were like before. They were like, you know, Pat O'Malley or Bing Crosby, Barry Fitzgerald. I think folks don't know what priests are about these days. And we're about, I think, the recreation of a new identity of what does it mean to be a priest, to be a follower of Jesus today. And I take glee in kind of playing with people's expectations of what Father ought to be doing. Like I jog in the neighborhood, and the kids love to see that. Love to see that their priest is out there, can be a regular guy, but still be able to talk about the dream and message of Jesus in a way that they find exciting and applicable to their lives. So there's not a lot of cultural support. That's all right. It's kind of fun almost being a countercultural symbol. At times it's difficult, but I have the sense that we're engaged in the remaking of what priest is in the 80s and in the 90s, and I'm excited about being a part of that remaking, reshaping that identity.
That old image, though, the Bing Crosby, Barry Fitzgerald, really wasn't a valid image, at that time either, because back in the 30s we had the great worker movements. You had priests and even, I can name a bishop or two, who were marching with the workers at that time when they were trying to form unions and all that stuff. So this idea, that old Irish idea, was...
simply doesn't apply.
No, it was a Hollywood idea that people sort of liked, they were comfortable with, but at the same time it really wasn't realistic.
See, I think people will respond to a holy person. And I think the task of any religious person in a public sort of way, be they a religious woman or a guy entering priesthood or the brotherhood, is to be a holy person. And I think folks will recognize it on their deepest levels.
Patty, what are your dreams or ambitions? Usually when you start out, it's like the world was standing still before, and now you're going to change it.
There isn't enough of it that I can get. In fact, there are mornings that I have to force myself to stay in bed because I'm so excited to get out there and live.
Really?
Live as a pre-religious.
It's great to be that excited.
It really is that exciting. I've never been more thrilled. My immediate ambition is to enter the priory, of course, in fall and go through 2 years of formation. And then following that, I would like to do pastoral ministry in a parish here in Chicago. I just finished a degree at Loyola in pastoral ministry. And realizing that I can't make a commitment to a parish now, this coming year, because I would have to leave for my novice year, my long-term ambition would be to work in pastoral ministry here in Chicago.
But both of you now have to be aware, though, of your own contemporaries and their attitude towards the church. See, because you answer a religious calling, but you become part of an organization too, whatever that means right now. What are your peers' attitude toward those who are not entering religious life but are getting married and jobs in the world? What do you think their attitude is towards the church right now? This is the church you're going to become a part of in a special way. What do you think their attitude towards it, John?
I think many my peers, young adults between the ages of 23 and, say, 35, I think many of them experience some distance for the church, especially singles, single professional people. I think the church, the parish system in Chicago is basically set up for the younger people and people with families, and I think they find themselves falling through the cracks many times. They sometimes do not find the liturgy at church always speaking directly to their situation. So I think they've enjoyed the church of their childhood, but they find that that is no longer applicable to their situation in life right now. So I think they've kind of disassociated from church as they knew it as a child. But I also think there's a void. You can't get it in the singles bars. You're not getting it in the job situation. And if you're living off in Schaumburg, you don't have too many neighbors that you know. So I think on one hand, they're kind of, they have problems with the church of the childhood, but I think they are hungry. I think they're hungry for a reconfiguration, a reshaping of church to meet their own station and point in life, and they're open to that.
You used the expression reshaping.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
Well, I think any church worth its salt has to talk about the movement of God in people's lives as it occurs. And I think at least for people my age, young adults my age, it would mean doing some reflection, some sharing, giving a chance for people to meet each other, first of all, not in a situation where folks won't rip each other off, but a situation of love and support, to be able to talk about some of the deeper issues and life concerns, value questions, all under the shadow or the auspices of Jesus. And I think that can be done. I mean, I've seen it happen. And it's that church they'll buy into. They said, that's a church that's worth my salt.
What's your experience of this, Patti?
My friends, the people that I associate with, are not having a problem with me going into the church because they themselves don't have problems with the church. I guess most of my friends are in religious life themselves, and so I'm not coming up against, well, how can you do that with your life? But I certainly understand the groups that John is talking about, because he'll be in parish situations meeting those young people, hopefully meeting them in the church. But I have yet to really have to deal with that.
When the present Pope now is traveling around the world, and he was here a year and a half ago, very difficult to keep a church that's made up of people from all the continents, variety of cultures, etc. But in terms of leadership, what's your feeling about where the church is going right now?
I think it's a mixed bag. I find it a mixed bag. I was standing out in front of the Art Institute next to a Mexican or Spanish-speaking couple on my left hand. There were some Polish cleaning ladies on my right hand. And there was a young family, obviously from the suburbs, because they kept checking their wallets every 5 minutes, right in front of me. And I was excited. I felt proud to be a Catholic that day in the city of Chicago, because the church was out there. What other group can get such a large gathering without anybody getting killed or mugged? You know, it was a gathering of love. So what the Pope has done to renew and to get folks excited about being Catholic again, I think is tremendous. I think the leadership is strong. I especially like some of the things he said about social justice. There's some other areas that I'm not as happy with, but I'll give the Pope a chance. He's the boss.
I'm excited, though, because I think the real leadership comes down to the people at the grassroots level, the people that are working in the parishes, that are doing the educating in the high schools and the grammar schools. And so the leadership was put out by the Pope, but that's back in Rome. And so we've really got to get down here at city level, at the base level, and inspire people to want to be part of the church again.
You know, the complaint is made that a lot of people have an attraction to Christianity, but not to church. You know, the organization bugs them or disturbs them, but Christianity, reading the Jesus of the Bible, as it were, but the Jesus that's enveloped in an organization, sometimes they have grave problems with.
Well, I think we just have to keep it from being organizational. I think we have to have somebody who knows what we're doing on Saturday nights and Sunday mornings. And there has to be systems in a parish, or certainly in an archdiocese, to keep it going. But then it has to become people. The people are the church, and if we stay with that notion, I think we'll be safe.
What do you think about that, John?
It is kind of a cop-out in a way, because Christianity, the concept is amorphous. You know, you say, I believe in the Jesus of the Bible. Yeah. Okay, great, but how does that pan out? You know, what are you going to do?
Right.
And once you hit the practical question, you need to start talking about church. And I think there are good and holy expressions of the dream of Jesus, and I think there are less than good expressions of it. And I think the obligation is up to us, you know. What are we going to do? What do we want to make? You know, what do we want to make our parishes? How alive, how sensitive to the gospel? How much are we going to be preaching in our parishes, or how much are we going to let them just go on from week to week?
With bingo in between.
Well, I just, you know, it's up to us. It's up to us. So.
What about, you know, the life of a church really exists on the combination of a number of levels, the contemplative, the prayer life, and then action life. Mm-hmm. Are we living in an age where action means much more than the contemplative or prayer? I mean, is the church's real mission today social problems? Because that seems to excite a lot of young people, social questions.
I think we have to stay aware of the social issues and be actively involved, but there is no way that we can be productive in our involvements in social issues unless we pull away.
Unless I'm reading it wrong, this is one of the complaints that John Paul II mentioned when he was down in Mexico. He said we should support, you know, religious values and social questions, but priests are not supposed to be leading these things, these charges.
I interpret my primary responsibility. I would like to be as intimately involved with the preaching and the bringing to birth the kingdom of God in the world. I want to be a follower of Jesus. And I want to be sensitive to that movement as I interpret it in my people and in the solitude of my heart, in my moments with my God. And I think that has me doing various different things at any one given time. And at times it will be a very heavy involvement in social justice. I'm not being ordained a priest just to be, if I wanted to do the social piece, I'd be a political organizer, and I can do that. But my primary responsibility is to the movement of God in my life. And we'll see where that takes me. I think there's a heavy social component in that. But I think the most basic thing for me is the movement of God, servicing that.
Well, you know the Benedictine motto, don't you? Ora et labora, which is the combination, the same, pray and work.
We have to have a healthy balance.
Balance, yes.
Definitely. And that's one of my reasons for going into a Benedictine lifestyle, is that they value prayer over anything else, but we combine that with good works, and then it also gets extended to doing, for instance, we have exercise that's, we recreate. We are not just working, we are not just praying, but we are recreating with our sisters. We are being active in the community.
What do your contemporaries think about the fact now you're entering priesthood religious life and you're not going to get married? This is one of the big things today, celibacy or the vow of chastity. What do they really think about that today?
They can't understand it.
I agree.
I can't understand it. Half the time, I have to figure that one out. But it is, frankly, it's a stumbling block, and it is. They find that bothersome. How could you possibly do it? And I find myself saying the same thing to myself sometimes. How can you possibly do it? I think that it's hard to explain this to people, but the love you experience when you fall in love with the people, it's a very special, very nuanced kind of human love that at times is extraordinary, at times is very lonely. But I find that I'm energized and taken care of and nurtured enough by the love I experience and my people at St. James Parish now to let me live, I think, at depths I've never lived before. So it's tough. It's going to be tough not having a wife and kids. And I think people react to that, saying, how can you do it?
Some people have to get married a couple of years. They're saying it's tough to have a wife and kids, or a husband and kids.
Yeah.
I think there's very simply a cost to any commitment we make, and the cost to my commitment to work for the Lord is not having my own children and not having a husband. But I can look around at my contemporaries who have husband and have children or have wife, and they can be missing something as well. that I will be able to have the ability to love more than my family. Has,
A larger family.
to love the larger family, which is the Benedictines I'll enter, and then of course everything that comes from there.
All right, now both of you are young, you're beginning, and you're very enthusiastic. This comes over very strongly. How do you convince or get into the heads of a greater number of your own contemporaries the idea this would be a great life to follow?
Never push it. I would never say, follow me, because when I look back on my own past, from the time I was 14 and I said, I think I want to be a sister, and then I said, I don't think I want to do this. Nobody ever pulled me by the arm and said, you said you were going to do it, now why don't you do it? It just had to come when I was older, when I was 28, 29, and I don't think that you can put vocation in the head of anyone else. If you live your vocation happily, that might give the clue to someone else that this is a good way to go. But you can't put your finger out there like the United States posters and say, I want you.
Well, that's what Jesus said to the apostles.
Mm-hmm.
He said, come on, I want you. And they went.
I would
You don't think it happened that way, huh?
Patty. I mean, my approach, I tend to be more aggressive about that. I think folks are making decisions about their lives in a real narcissistic sort of setting. What can I get? How much money can I make? Where is it going to take me? How much recognition will I have? And I would like to challenge young men and young women and say, the truth about human life is, how much can I give my life away? And I defy you to stack any other, I mean, there's a lot of other professions, but consider priesthood or sisterhood, because you give your life away, and in doing that, you discover your life. My life is good.
You know, I think there's a great comparison, though, between married life and the religious life, because the same qualities are required in both.
Right.
Exactly the same qualities. You really got to give yourself to some others, husband, wife, and children, or to other people. There's no way that you could ever be happy in either one of those lives without your giving yourself. It's not a question of what you can get out of it. You get only in terms of what you give, really.
That's right. Yeah. Same movement.
People have said, what are you going to be? And I said, I'm not going to be any, what are you going to do? And I said, I'm not going to do anything. I'm going to become a Benedictine, and I just trust that everything else will flow from that. I'm not going to get anything. I'm not going to get a secure home, or to get a new family, or to get a new title.
Well, sometimes people think that the religious life is very secure, but it's not as secure now as it once was. Yeah. Well, listen, we've run out of time. It's a pleasure to have had with us today Patti Cielinski, who is going to enter the Benedictine convent this fall, and John Horan, who will be ordained to the priesthood of the Archdiocese of Chicago this May 13th, and with the energy and the ambitions and the hope that you've seen exuded here so enthusiastically, these two young people are great signs of the future of the Church.
Gamut welcomes letters from viewers. Please address your comments to Gamut, 1 North Wacker Drive, Suite 1101, Chicago, Illinois, 60606. 1 North Wacker Drive, Suite 1101, Chicago, Illinois, 60606.
Today we're discussing really the question of vocation to priesthood and religious life. And of course, vocation doesn't come out of the blue. God doesn't come out of the sky and tap us on the head to indicate he wants this. It really comes from other people. And as you've heard these two young people talking about their own vocation, the two major sources are other priests and religious who are happy in what they're doing, they're dynamic, and that's contagious. And then the support of their own family, because really the family is the place where you get your religious values. You learn them from your father and your mother. And these two are the sources of this call. God works through priests and religious to get other priests and religious, and through fathers and mothers. And then, of course, the priesthood obviously doesn't have the forms of glamour, perhaps, that other vocations have in this world. But I don't care what you do in terms of the business world or anything else, The two callings that deal with life fundamentally are religious life, priesthood, and parenthood, because the dividends are not cash, they're eternal life. Human beings live forever, and that's what priesthood, religious life is really all about, leading human beings to eternal life. For Gamut, this is Martin Winters.
To this Columban missionary, the road to the people he serves is carved out of dense tropical rainforest. The Columban fathers share the good news with people everywhere. There's a whole world out there waiting for you.
Out of sight, out of mind. Monday at 10 on Channel 5.
In celebration of the 33rd anniversary of the State of Israel, some of my best friends presents Long Ago I Ceased to Be Young, the letters of Jonathan Netanyahu.